Hi, thanks so much for arranging this, Joanna. Excellent job, readers, so far. Thanks, Mom, for being in the room before me, and for everyone who came out tonight. I'm going to read an abridged version of a short story. So it was the one in the normal school. So if you want to check it out, the whole thing, find it. But it's called Exit 105. So, okay. Glenn's wasn't one of those fucking cliche cancer stories. It wasn't fighting for survival, lamenting with his wife and kids, telling everyone to go on without him. It was stomach pains that led to 6 weeks to live, which was really 4.5, every moment of which he was fucking sick and despondent and couldn't walk for more than a few minutes and could barely talk or swallow. Everyone begged him to fight harder, but he didn't. He didn't wear a ribbon, and he didn't laugh with the nurses, and he didn't reveal the secret of happiness to his children. He gave in to his disease, let it eat him from the inside out. The last weeks of his life were the most miserable of the whole damn thing, except for one simple moment. 2 weeks before his death, Glenn sat in the front seat in the driver's seat of his Lexus. He took the parkway to exit 105 and almost hit an SUV while trying to negotiate the new roadways and U-turns. It used to be simple, one road straight to the beach. Now it seemed like the shore was evolving without him. Skip a few months in the winter and everything was lost. His phone buzzed for the fourth time, but he didn't pick up. The last person on the whole planet he wanted to talk to was his wife. He wasn't in the mood to hear any of her shit, and it wasn't because of the cancer. He'd felt this way for 30 years. He'd wanted to leave her 5, 10, hell, even 30 years ago. Even when he first married her, he hated her, but he could never bring himself to do it. He was always too weak, always making excuses. It seemed once he got diagnosed, fourth stage, pancreatic, months or weeks or days or moments left. Everyone had a suggestion for treatment. Buddies from high school telling him to consider Mexico. His wife's friends recommending Reiki and acupuncture and yoga. Fucking yoga while he was fucking dying. And those who advocated for modern medicine all swore on the specialist they knew. This doctor in New York, the surgeon that saved their parents' brother-in-law. Everyone knew something or someone who could help him. It was easy to hope when you had nothing to lose. Glenn was sick of it all. He didn't need clinical trials or another doctor's appointment. He didn't need chakras or manifestation. He needed his cracking feet against the sand, his balding head burning in the sun, the smell of low tide and the days of his shore summers rolling in and out of his memory. That's what he needed, and that's what he was determined to get. He parked and stepped down from board to sand. As a kid, he'd lived for shore summers. All North Jersey kids had. He and his friends would talk about it daily in school. They'd count down the days, place bets to see who could make their family leave early. They'd set fireworks off in their backyards, ride their bikes to the beach, sneak into the stone pony and stand so close to Springsteen they could feel the heat of his breath. They never imagined there would be a time when they'd grow up, when they'd prioritize anything over summer, when they'd gain weight and lose their hair, when they'd find wives to fight with and have children that talk to them in ways their parents would never have forgiven. If he told his father to leave him alone, that he was sick of being told what to do, his dad would have picked up a coat hanger and a belt and asked him to choose. Glenn sat in his bony ass in the sand of his childhood and rubbed the weight of his eyes. He thought about Jean from forever ago, Jean with her 3 crazy older brothers, Jean with sea glass eyes and a deep guttural laugh, Jean who he could still smell, still taste when he searched his mind. He'd met her on the boardwalk. She asked him for a light. A week later, he kissed her. A month later, they had sex. His first time. It was cliche as summer romances can be, but at the end of the summer, when she told him she wanted to be with him, that she didn't care that he was leaving, that they'd write and call and make promises to each other, he couldn't commit. He told her it was just for the summer, that type of thing, nothing serious, nothing worth holding on to. And of course, she'd screamed and threatened and called him an asshole and asked him why, and it's not fair, and egged his car and slept with his friend and did everything she could to hurt him in the way she'd been hurt. Now Glenn, dying from cancer, sharp ass on flat sand, time ticking, felt like the biggest moron in the world. He'd married a woman out of fear, the same fear that prevented him from committing to Jean, the fear that he'd be miserable and alone if he didn't marry, when just a few years before it was the fear that he'd be miserable and alone if he committed to someone from somewhere else. Then again, he often convinced himself that dying was getting in the way of his judgment. He didn't know if he wanted Jean or if he ever really wanted her. Maybe she was just all of those things in life he never got to experience. Maybe she was all of those things that he experienced but would never get to relive. Or maybe he was just dying and desperate for anything, whether it be truth or fabrication, to make him feel like there was still blood coursing through his tired veins. Glenn stared at the cotton candy horizon. He tried to pretend he was just on the beach, hanging for a few hours before seeing Jean. He tried to lean back, but instead he fell from elbows to head in a solid thud. A woman was shaking him when he came to. She was panicking, asking him if he was all right, screaming for help. "I'm fine, I'm okay," he tried to manage, but his mouth was dry and he couldn't whisper. "Let me call an ambulance." She pressed a bottle of water against his lips and wetness slid out the sides of his mouth. He shook his head as surely as he was able and took hold of the bottle. "Please, please don't," he managed. "I'm okay. I know what's wrong with me." She helped him to his feet and he stood for a moment. He tried to make it the longest moment of his life. He tried to hold on to it like you would a hug from your parents, the end of an orgasm, a meal on death row, but it passed, just like everything else it passed, and he knew she was watching him. He knew it was time to leave. He drove himself to the hospital, the same one he went to when he had alcohol poisoning at 19. He and Jean and some of their friends had been chugging whiskey from brown paper bags, and the next thing he knew, he was on a bed in a white room, parents at his side ready to end him. When he walked through the sliding doors, nothing was as he remembered. Everything was repainted, remodeled, different posters on the walls, different uniforms, new computers. "Sir, can I help you?" a man behind the glass divider asked. Glenn almost laughed. He wanted to say, "No, no, you can't. No one can help me." But instead, he sighed and said, "I'm here to check myself in." Thank you.
That's great. Next up is Emily Wallace Hughes. She's the author of Sugar Factory, published by